So, Toy Story 4. Yeah, it's the fourth Toy Story film, and man, these seems like these movies have been going on for ages. And I know what you're thinking, like, Toy Story 3, it kind of ended on a great final note. The toys that once belonged to Andy have now been passed on to a new owner, Bonnie. The little girl Bonnie. So it seems like all the toys are safe, and like the story kind of wrapped up with Andy and everyone's happy. It seems like that was a good note to go out on. So you might be asking yourself, well, why are we going back to it? Why are we doing a Toy Story 4 here? And especially like 9 years after the last film. Why are we coming back to this? Now, of course, everyone likes to jump on the train and say it was just a cash grab. That there's no more story left to tell here. But in truth. And not too surprising to me, there actually is a story left to tell here. A very, very poignant story, very funny story, and if I'm being honest here, and I know this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I honestly think this is probably the best entry in the saga. Especially because, like, if Toy Story 3 didn't seem like a conclusion, I don't know for sure if they're gonna do Toy Story 5. They might, but this definitely feels like the strongest conclusion, and it feels like it's warranted. It doesn't feel like they're just tacking stuff on here. It feels like there's an actual story left to tell within Toy Story, which I was kind of confident about. I'm like, okay, what, Toy Story's been solidly great with like every entry. The second film was great. It found emotional heartstrings to tug on. The third film really got to the heart of like how these toys come together. So I imagine that the fourth film is actually going to be very strong. And surprisingly, it is very strong for taking some very interesting choices with this type of story. Okay, so like I mentioned, yeah, it takes place after the events of Toy Story 3. So all the toys are now in the possession of Bonnie. This little girl is just about to go into kindergarten, and everybody seems fine. Playtime's great. Bonnie loves playing with the toys. She's a great little girl. Everyone loves her. Everything seems fine, except for Woody, the cowboy toy voiced by Tom Hanks once more. Now Woody, as we learn from kind of like a little bit of a flashback, Woody used to be like not only Andy's favorite toy, but the toy hero, the hero of the room. Like if there was a toy missing or a problem with the toy, Woody would handle it. Woody was always in charge. He would always come to the rescue and save a toy. And we learn in a flashback actually how he lost Bo Peep. Like we kind of briefly mentioned Bo Peep in Toy Story 3, that she was kind of gone, and we didn't really address it because it seemed like a very sensitive topic. And now we learn why it was a sensitive topic, because Woody actually did have to say goodbye to Bo Peep, and a rather somber goodbye, but also a realization that Woody can't quite always be there for everyone. That he can't always save the day, and sometimes he might have to step aside, and that is unfortunately starting to bubble up when he's in like a Bonnie's collective of toys. Because it turns out, to his surprise, Woody's not the best toy. He's not the most favored. He spends a lot of more time in the closet than any of the other toys. And so Woody is, first off, he does feel, a little bit lonely, a little bit neglected, but, he's a hardened hero, he's used to it. He just feels like he's not being, he's not fulfilling a purpose, that he's not, playing a big part in Bonnie's life. And so he decides that he's got to find a project, something to do. And fortunately, a project of Bonnie's kind of comes into his lap when Bonnie is going into kindergarten. In order to cope with the fact that she can't bring toys to school, she figures, well, she can make toys in school. So she ends up making, out of a spork, googly eyes, glue, popsicle sticks, and pipe cleaners, she ends up making Forky. This little handmade toy that Bonnie has made herself. And surprise, surprise, the toy is actually alive. And it's voiced by Tony Hale, which is just perfect. Because Forky is paranoid. He is terrified of his own existence. He feels that, as a spork, he was not meant to be this kind of like sentient toy. He was meant to be used, for food and then to be thrown away. In fact, he's so desperate to fulfill that purpose that he's trying to kill himself. He's trying to throw himself in the trash any point he gets. But since Bonnie relies on this toy as sort of like, a part of like coping with going into kindergarten, Woody decides like, oh, well, I'll protect Forky. I'll let Forky in on, the whole toy philosophy and, what it means to be a toy. I'll take him under my wing. Now that would seem like it would be enough for a film, and it kind of is, because it's more or less kind of, Woody, um, not kind of like a mixture of like passing the torch and also kind of like, having a kid, so embracing the next generation more or less, and sort of like, taking someone under your wing. But there's more to Woody that we focus on through here. Specifically when they end up going on a road trip. Forky becomes lost, so Woody has to save him. But on their journey back to Bonnie, he discovers that he's found Bo Peep. And not only has he found Bo Peep, but he's conflicted about his relationship with her. Bo Peep is once again voiced by Annie Potts, and she reveals that this whole time she did have some owners, but now she's out on her own. She's basically kind of like a like a Mad Max wanderer. She just kind of like she has, I believe, what's like a mechanical skunk that she just travels around the road as kind of like a lost toy. A lost toy that's kind of like independent and action driven. Like she's no longer the kind of like docile Bo Peep. Her and her sheep are just like kind of like action heroes now, which I kind of dug. I kind of like this aspect to her. But so when Woody finally finds her, he's conflicted about if he wants to stay with Bo Peep as a lost toy, or if he wants to go back to Bonnie. And so there's this big conflict about, what is Woody going to do for the next stage of his life? And he's not sure how to go about it, because he spent so much time being this protector of toys that he feels that his work isn't done, and that he has to try to find like a way to help out everyone, including the villain they run across here, which is Gabby Gabby, voiced by Christina Hendricks. Gabby Gabby is an antique doll, which they find in this antique shop, which I gotta... Okay, we'll talk about Gabby Gabby. I gotta mention this first. The environments that they put these toys into are great. They have a carnival where there's basically all sorts of like, mechanical rides that they have to get around. The antique shop in particular is great because they have all these kind of like, dusty alleys behind the shelves and in the back rooms and stuff like that. It makes it look like a dark and dirty city. I kind of like that atmosphere. And so Gabby resides in the antique shop, and she desperately wants to change herself and believes that Woody holds the key to making sure that she'll be a toy that'll be played with instead of just sitting on the shelf collecting dust. And so Woody's conflicted about helping her, but at the same time trying to help everyone else, and kind of learns the value of himself and self-sacrifice, and about what it means to actually be a protector, to realize that in some cases you do have to step back. You do have to take a moment to not just be the hero that steps in to save everyone. And this is not an easy lesson for Woody to learn, and it's a very emotional one too. That by the end, it actually kind of tugged on the heartstrings here. Like Tom Hanks has mentioned in interviews that he actually got choked up while recording his lines here, and you can actually hear him getting choked up in this film. There's a very emotional moment of realization where Woody, if Woody could cry, he probably would, because you can hear it in his voice here. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, we're talking an awful lot about Woody here. Is there anything else happening with the rest of the toys? Well, like I said, most of the toys are fine. They've kind of snugly gotten into the good groove of being Bonnie's play toys, so they're not too conflicted. They're more kind of like supporting characters. Like in particular, we have Buzz Lightyear, once again played by Tim Allen, and Buzz just kind of like used mostly for comic effect. Like, he tries to save Woody, but he ends up running across some other toys that he's trying to save, particularly Carnival plush toys voiced by Key and Peele, which are great. Probably the funniest characters by far, which shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, it's Key and Peele, and they have just this great chemistry together. But most of the film with Buzz is just him trying to figure out his inner voice, and that's mainly because he had one conversation with Woody, and then he thinks inner voice is basically your actual voice box, which kind of plays into the plot, but it's kind of more for Woody's story than it is kind of like for Buzz. Because most of the other characters are just kind of there. They step in when they need to be an essential part of the plot here. They do end up causing a little bit of havoc for the humans, which is actually quite a bit of fun, especially the way they terrorize Bonnie's dad, just to make sure that all the toys are accounted for and that they look out for their own. So some hilarious stuff happens through there. We also got to mention Keanu Reeves playing Duke Kaboom, a Canadian stunt bike, kind of like an Evil Knievel type toy that, you put the figure on the bike and he runs up a ramp and he crashes, but he contorts back together. He's fun, but man, do they play up that Canadian aspect. They make as many Canadian jokes as possible. Still a fun character, though. Still a fun character. So yeah, I mean, this is one of those stories that I know for a lot of people, a big criticism is going to be that they don't really find a lot to do with all the toys. But honestly, I'm fine with that. I'm fine if they just focus on Woody, because clearly Woody is the only character left here that has a major hang up that he's got to get over, and more or less to make him evolve into the next stage of his life. That it touches on that so well, and it's very poignant. It's very interesting, and we stick with it throughout the whole film. Like, that was one of my biggest criticisms of How to Train Your Dragon 3, is that How to Train Your Dragon 3 felt like it was trying to give everybody something to do, so that no character was kind of like shoved off to the side and wasted. And part of the problem that I said with that is that because you focus on so many characters, you don't really get as much time to get invested in the central ones and feel what they're feeling. Like, it just feels like busy work. And thankfully, Toy Story 4 is not that film. It's very much about Woody and how he feels. I mean, to an extent, pretty much all the Toy Story films have more or less been about Woody in some degree. And then, like, the other characters are mostly just kind of like, like comedic foils. They would come in and they provide the laughs and support here. Which I got to mention too, like, yeah, I am talking very profoundly and poignantly about this film, but don't worry, if you're taking the kids will actually love it. It is deeply hilarious. I laughed out loud at least 3 or 4 times during this, and it's not just for knowing humor. It's for great slapstick. It's for line delivery. It's for just like the way they present the world here. There is a lot of great laughs in here. I really enjoyed that aspect. But like I said, we've got to mention the biggest aspect of this is that it feels like a bigger story here, the same way that Toy Story 3 was touching on some deeper elements of kind of like a Prison Break film. This feels very much like almost kind of like a noirish adventure at times, and I think it's mostly just because like the staging with like the antique shops and stuff like that. So like it does what Pixar films do best. It weaves a very emotional story, a frankly more intelligent and adult story, which is very rare, especially for a film that's rated G. Like, all the Toy Story films have pretty much been rated G. So and especially when you consider that we don't really get that many G-rated films. So to have one that's this intelligent and moving and deeply funny is quite an accomplishment here. We also got to mention the huge cast they've assembled here. This voice cast, like, I mean, yes, we got the regulars. We got John Ratzenberger. We've got Bonnie Hunt, we've got Joan Cusack, we've got pretty much most of the characters from the last 3 films. We've got them all assembled here. We've also got some very small roles here, voiced by with other characters voicing some interesting characters here. At one point, Woody's stuck in the closet with all the older preschool toys, and they all have older voice actors, which I kind of dug. So you got stuff like voice actors like Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks and Betty White and Carol Burnett. And it's like, you assembled all these actors just for this one little scene of all these old toys just kind of like talking together, which I kind of thought was great here. Yeah, I mean, it's such like I really want to see this film again, because I feel like there's a lot more to this than what I initially saw, and it's a lot to take in, especially when you consider all the different themes here that they're working with, how they stage Woody's kind of like somber realization of trying to come to terms with himself and his journey of self-discovery. Forky's a lot of fun too, but it's also interesting to kind of focus on Forky and his fears of going into the future, which kind of provide an interesting parallel with Woody's insecurities. But the other thing too, and we'll address this too, is that the fact that Forky can come to life kind of addresses the kind of like odd nature of like how toys become sentient. But thankfully they don't touch on this too much. They do what I think Pixar films should be doing when they address subjects of birth and death especially with like inanimate objects, which is you don't draw too much attention to the specifics of it. Like when Forky comes to life, the toys are not really questioning the mechanics of how Forky comes to life. They just kind of accept it. And even by the end, there's the last few lines of the film have Forky talking with another kind of craft toy, and the craft toy essentially he says to Forky like, how are we alive? And Forky just gives the best answer, kind of like assuredly, kind of like smiling, I don't know. And you don't need to know. That's the great thing about it, is that and like Pixar's kind of done this with like the Cars films, even though I think they kind of missed a mark there with Cars 3, because then you do start questioning it because it does address death, but they don't really address birth and death within the Toy Story realm too much, because if you do, it gets convoluted and it gets too weird, and you lose you lose the grander aspects of like the great themes that are being woven here with this amazing storytelling. I love this film. I had a lot of laughs with it. I actually got very little choked up towards the end of the film there. Very much on the same level that I did with Toy Story 3. And the more I think about it, the more I love just examining both the world within Toy Story, because there's a lot of great detail here with like the carnival and the antique shop and inside the RV. And just analyzing this character of Woody and how he has to come to terms with himself and learn how to say goodbye. I adore this film. This is easily one of the best entries in the Pixar saga I've seen. And I know I'm saying like it's easily the best, but I know for a lot of people they're gonna, oh well, it can't be that good. It can't be as good as 3. But the more I thought about it, just the more I considered everything that happened in the film and what I loved about it and what was interesting to explore within the Toy Story realm, I gotta admit, I love this film a lot. I absolutely adore it. So for Toy Story 4, 5 out of 5 stars.